Oh, there we go.
Okay, well,
There I am.
Hi, Kathy. Thanks for
How are
joining
you?
us. Good, how are you?
Good.
All right, we are going to get started today as we still let people kind of trickle in. Thank you so much for joining us, everybody. This is a Lunch and Learn series, and today we're talking about something really exciting, just learning more about our visitors, our customers, and exploring their motivations, just to really understand them and see what we can do to make sure we're providing a fantastic experience as an agency. So welcome. As you're coming in, make sure you're muted if you can. You can leave your video on, of course. And we will, if you have questions throughout the presentation, as always, enter them in the chat, or we'll discuss at the end too if you want to discuss with your video on it as well. My name is Amber Schiltz. I'm the Wildlife Education Program Manager in the Fish and Wildlife Education Division. And I'm also joined today by Jane. Jane, you can introduce yourself if you'd like.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jane Gustafson, and I am one of the Assistant Division Administrators in Communications. I'm kind of the agency's Marketing and Advertising Manager, and I am happy to be here with Amber today.
Yeah, thank you very much. Okay, so as we go along, just to let you know, we are recording this, and this will be available later on we have a YouTube channel, the Nebraska Game Parks Conferences and Sessions channel. And there's a playlist there for all of these past Lunch and Learn series webinars, and then also the future ones will be recorded there as well. So if this is your first time joining us for a Lunch and Learn series, welcome, thank you so much. If you've attended any of these ones in the past, hopefully you enjoyed it enough to come back. Maybe you enjoy learning, or you're nerdy enough like myself and Jane, and you're excited about these types of things and these opportunities to just learn more about science and education topics, really, for our agency. And the goal, again, with this series, it's sometimes it's a lofty goal, but I do my best to try to bring topics and make them accessible, no matter what division we're in, no matter what role we play. I feel like a lot of these topics are helpful in any of our positions. And so the next one coming up is May 12, Science Literacy. What is it and why is it important? I'm really excited about that one. That's one of my favorite topics. And then in June, Communicating Controversial Topics and Teaching Tough Subjects. This is going to be a fun one as well. I do have the last 6 months of the last year planned out as well. There's a few things being finalized, but I will have that schedule for the next 6 months out, hopefully before the May one, and I will be sending that out as well. So we have some really exciting topics coming up. So thanks again for joining us. Again, if you're trickling in, if you have questions throughout this, please put them in the chat. We'll do our best to get to you as we go along, and there is some time at the end for discussion as well, because I really like to hear from everybody on, what you've learned and how we can apply this to your positions, and how this maybe can be helpful. And then I also will be sending out evaluations at the end, because I always want to know how I can be improving this series to make sure that it's most meaningful for everybody here. Okay? All right, let's get started. So today we're going to be understanding our visitors, or thinking about maybe different ways that we go about trying to understand our visitors, and why as well. So we'll start off by talking about why are we exploring motivations? What's the purpose behind that? What's helpful behind that? Jane's going to talk about some really fascinating research that Game Parks has actually helped with and done, the customer segmentation research that was done, I think, a few years ago. So she's going to shed some light on that. That's pretty interesting to hear about, and how that's going to tie in then to the 5 visitor types research that is done on a more national and even global scale when trying to understand why visitors or people come to museums and parks and things like that. And so I'll be talking about those 5 visitor types. We'll also be applying what we've learned. I always like to try to see how we can take what we learned today and apply it to specific Game and Parks scenarios or topics. And then, of course, reflection and questions. All right. So why explore motivations? But our main goal, no matter what role we're in Game and Parks, is we really want to provide our constituents, our visitors, our customers with an experience and connecting them to the outdoor resource and connecting them to the natural resource all around us. And really, and then as education, we want to move them from just that connection to stewardship. We really want to understand what our visitors' motivations are, because the more we understand what motivates them to hunt or to fish or to come to our parks or to engage with our programs, the more we can understand how to meet those expectations and maybe even exceed them, and just really create that meaningful experience to keep them coming back, or to keep them hunting and fishing, or to keep them visiting our parks. So in the past, this isn't a new concept to try to understand more about our visitors or our audience, right? And in the past, it's been a lot of, to understand our constituents, we're looking at really fixed things like demographics, who's coming to our parks or programs, who's hunting and fishing, are they female, are they male, what's their racial background, what's their college, what's their highest level of education, and things like that. And that is a form of identity, and it can be very useful. To me, I think that's most useful to make sure that we're meeting a broad spectrum of our constituents, and we're making sure we're providing resources to everybody. But it doesn't tell the whole picture of why people come to our parks or why people are motivated to engage in our resources. And so it's really in the last maybe 10 or 15 years in the behavioral science of looking at people who are going to parks and museums and recreating and things like that, it's shifted from who is doing these things to why, to better understand that, to better meet their needs. And then that's going to lead right into Jane chatting about this really fascinating survey stuff that she was participating in. So Jane, you want to go ahead?
I will. Thank you very much, Amber. What I'm going to do is kind of give everybody the 10,000 foot view of what motivates some customers and things to participate in the outdoors, and some of the work that we've done learning these things. And then that's going to lead into Amber's part, where she talks a little bit more about the actual one-on-one, face-to-face of people coming to an event or coming to a facility or coming to a program. So the communications department looks at a lot of different things, and we're always looking at the demographics of our customers, our hunting and fishing and parks customers, and those who attend our programming. And we were thinking about different ways to reach people, and we realized that in addition to your typical knowing who your audience is or who you want your audience to be, it isn't just demographics like gender, like age, like geographical location, and things like that. There's a lot to be said about the motivation for why people want to do certain things. Why do they want to hunt? Why do they want to fish? Why do they want to go camping? And so we had done some research back about 5 years or a little bit longer than that, I guess, back in 2013, 2014. We had done some initial research, and some of you may have heard us talk about that, that was geared at motivation and segmenting our audiences by motivation. In other words, did they go outdoors because they wanted to be alone and they wanted a natural experience? Did they do things in the outdoors because they did it very much as a family unit, and it was a traditional family thing that they did, and that was their motivation for going outdoors? We knew, having done it, that much like anything else, things change, and we needed to update that research. So we partnered with Swanson Russell, our advertising agency, and Southwick and Associates, and undertook some segmentation research to look at our current customers. Our resident customers was our main focus, although we did have a small research group of non-resident customers to kind of see how this played out among them too. But we looked at them and we tried to figure out what are their motivations for going outdoors and doing outdoor pursuits like hunting, fishing, and camping. And we also wanted to look at kind of some of their lifestyle factors, because that's another way that we could segment our audiences. And it ties in very well with motivational information. Just thinking about it broadly, this is something that is done if you run a business, if you're a corporation, if you run an organization, this type of research is done all over the place. And it's the basis for where people set up their marketing, how they do their advertising buys, how they communicate with their customers. And so we wanted to take some of those things from private industry and apply it to the things that we were doing here and make those decisions based on customer segments as well. It helps us not only assess our current customers and their motivations and divide them up by groups rather than just, okay, these people are anglers, these people are hunters, these people are campers, but it allows us to look at the customer holistically and say, okay, why are they doing these outdoor pursuits? And they can do more than one. What type of a lifestyle do they have? What's their main motivation for doing it? And it helps us craft better messages to them so that we can appeal to them or appeal to provide information to them and get them to realize the opportunities of the outdoors based on the things that motivate them. In addition, when we're segmenting that, it also helps us determine what types of messages they like to receive and what channels they like to receive their messages through. A lot of times these groupings will tell you where your best, most effective way is to reach out to those folks. You can communicate with them better. Do they like to get their information through social media? Are they someone who wants to hear it in print? Do they want to get an email about it? So it helps us communicate better, and it also helps us craft those messages and place those messages where they will be more effective. I noted that we focused on residents, and we did do that small subset of non-residents. And fortunately for us, we found there was a lot of commonality and crossover between them. So we looked at what we could learn from our customers. We also wanted to see, based on these segments of our current customers, where is their opportunity to grow people in participating in the outdoors? In other words, where are our growth audience opportunities? So if we have a lot of one type of customer and they have these types of motivations and these types of lifestyles, are there a lot more of those in Nebraska, or a lot more of those opportunities for non-residents that fit into that particular segment? So it helped craft messages for people who are currently our customers, but also those that we want to become our customers and that we want to make aware of these outdoor opportunities. If you go to the next slide, Amber, it will show you just a basic rundown of what we found, which is basically there were 6 different segments based on our research that had very unique and identifiable motivations for what they did outdoors. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because we can make the research available to you, and there's a lot there, and it's could be a presentation in itself. But it showed us, okay, of the group that we surveyed, how many do we have in each of these categories, and what are their primary motivations? Are they motivated because they're outdoors looking for an exciting experience? Are they motivated because they want to go try something new, or because they want to pass on tradition? With the research, then again, it showed each of those, where do they like to get their information, and what types of social media channels do they like to find things in. So go ahead and go to the next slide. Again, I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on this. I'm just going to show you a little bit of a taste of the type of information that was available in the segmentation research. For example, our first group here was the adventurers. That was a large, young, primarily male group, and they were driven by wanting thrills and excitement. They had a lot of common interests like fitness, sports, and oddly enough, cooking. They get excited about different thrills that they can do and different things that they can try in participating in the outdoors, and they like to share their information and share what they've done on social media and through YouTube, for example. Go ahead and go to the next slide. We also looked at all of these different groups and stratified them by age. So we had some idea. We were making sure that we covered all possible age groups in our markets. And we looked at how these different groups fell by age, because you'll notice there isn't a commonality that all adventurers can only be between ages 18 to 34. They were across the board. There were some in each of these different categories. So we looked at these age breakdowns too to try to figure out a little bit more about our customers' motivation and our customers' lifestyle. We go on to the next slide. You'll see that we got a lot of information about the activities that they like to do and the hobbies that they like to do. Our adventurers like to go out mountain biking. They like to spend afternoons at the shooting range. They had a large number of hunters and anglers in this particular group. So we learned a little bit about them and what they like to do and why they like to do it. Why is this important? Well, if you go to the next slide, Amber, we can then take that information and hone in on those motivations for looking at those growth audiences and the receptibility to our messages based on the activities they like to do. So if you are an adventurer, you're someone who is very likely to be receptive to hunting and fishing messages, because the things that we can craft in there to talk about the appeal of the excitement and the thrill and the personal challenge of it is going to be something that really appeals to that group. Conversely, we can think about how do we message about opportunities for things to do in our parks to those groups. Where are the groups and where are the segments that are parks things when we talk about making memories and either maybe going to a secluded area to relax or going to one of our venture parks to try something new? What are the types of messages that are going to resonate best with those different types of groups based on their motivation for doing different things? You go to the last slide, it's kind of a cheat sheet, a marketing cheat sheet that breaks all of this down into just some bullet points and some little icons, but it gives you this idea that people are different. They have different motivations for doing things. They have different ways to get their information. There are different ways to appeal to them to do the things that we have to offer in the outdoors. And so in looking at that from a 10,000 foot standpoint, that says, okay, why would you want to go outdoors and do something that's an outdoor pursuit? We get a good idea of how to appeal to them and what they might want to do. So we can craft a message that gets them into a park area, that gets them into maybe a family fishing night or an expo event or a nature encounter. Once they're there, though, they may have different characteristics based on what they want to achieve because they're there. We know how to get them there. Now that we've got them there, how can we make that experience the best experience possible for them? And Amber's going to share a little bit more on that and how we can then have success once they're there and it's a one-on-one situation.
Very good. Thank you so much, Jane. And that is really fascinating research and really helpful or fascinating results that you found. And before I move on, is there any questions? Because I know what Jane presented was a lot. I know, Jane, you've done presentations just on that topic before. And we'll also, when I send the evaluation after this, I'll certainly send those survey results as a PDF so everyone can have, I don't know if everyone is as nerdy as me, but that data is really cool to look at.
Interesting to look at.
But before we move on,
it's way too much to cover here, but it is interesting to look at. And it gives you a better idea of what types of customers we have. And again, once you can draw those customers in, you can see the correlation between that research and the research in the one-on-one motivations for why are they at your event, why are they at your facility, what do they hope to achieve out of it.
questions, but that was great. Thank you very much. Okay, so now moving from what Jane said to the specific agency research that we've done to our specific constituents and customers and visitors, I'm going to talk a little bit about some really cool research that I was first introduced to during a National Association of Interpretation conference, and I attended a seminar on this topic. And this is really cool. It's a research that's being done. It started with a behavioral scientist named Dr. John Falk, and he started looking at this in California. I think he used the California Science Academy Institute as kind of the groundwork for getting some of the initial data. Found some really cool results. Found that there's essentially, when he was looking at all these different motivations of why are people coming to this particular facility, no matter what he was looking at, he found that there was essentially, you could categorize all the visitors into 5 different types based on their motivation. And then once he found that, that type of research was then replicated in parks, in zoos, and museums across the country, and then even across the world. So similar things were found. And so that's the type of research that I'm going to chat about today. It's really cool. It's really fascinating. But before we get into that, what do visitors remember about when they visit our park or a program or an expo or a family fishing clinic, like Jane mentioned, and why is that important? Well, what they remember about that experience is going to influence how they felt about that experience. It's going to influence how they feel about Nebraska Game Parks as a whole, or maybe the outdoors as a whole. And it's also going to influence if they're going to come back, if they're going to think of our parks and our spaces and our programs as things to keep coming to for themselves or their family, or if they're going to let others know about it. And so that's really important to consider. And there's actually some interesting science behind, memory and what we remember and what influences how we remember things. And so that has a little bit to do with this cool motivational identity theory. So some of those factors, the number one thing is their basic needs supported? Now, I think maybe a lot of us will take this for granted. Let's say that, let's say I'm going to put on a program for a bunch of fifth graders, and we're going to do a bug walk, in a park. And I really want them to be so excited about bugs. I want them to know why they're important. And I want them to know all these really cool things. But I will tell you this, if some of those kids were thirsty or hangry, maybe they were hungry and it was right before lunch, or maybe they really needed to go to the bathroom and it wasn't very easy to find those facilities. That's that basic needs. Unfortunately, the next day or the week after, if those needs weren't met, that's mainly what they're going to remember rather than our objective for getting them to our park or that program or things like that. And so a lot of us take that for granted, but as professional science educators, this is what we think about a lot. You might have heard of this or seen this triangle before. It's called Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And so this is something that we think about a lot when we're developing programs or curriculum or events or things like that. Are we meeting those basic needs first? It's that food, water, warmth, and rest, of course, and then that security and safety. Are we making sure they feel safe, they feel welcome? And then that moves up the chain before the learning takes place, before the family can have a really great experience, before anything else. This is something to consider. What else influences people and what they remember? If things are novel, if they stand out to them, if things have a high emotional connection to them. So again, I think we touched on this a little bit in one of the past Lunch and Learns on how people learn, but it's not just they're going to remember like a knowledge and a fact. If they had an emotional connection, if they reflected on their own thoughts about something in an experience and then it met their needs there, they're going to remember that even more and even more positively. And also things supported later by experiences. This one's kind of tricky, but an example of this is say there was a cool geology program at a park that I went to and I was really excited about. And then even weeks or a month later, I saw a PBS special on geology of Nebraska. I will remember my experience at that park in that geology program. And then even while I'm watching that PBS special, connecting it to that experience is going to help me more positively remember that. So these are just some kind of interesting things to think about. So this is the 5 visitor types, and this is that research that I'm going to talk about today. Again, it's it was first introduced by Dr. John Falk. He's a behavior scientist, and he has a really great book. It's called Identity in the Museum Visitor Experience, where he dove into a lot of this, and also the results that were replicated around the world. And since then, there's been even more research on this, and it's really exciting. But one thing I want to make sure to make clear before I talk about each one of these fun visitor types is that the difference between some of these motivational identity types and, again, those kind of fixed identities, those demographic or those like, for example, I am a female, I am married, I have a young child, I live in Nebraska. Those are pretty fixed, right? But these ones are, these categories, you could be a different category each time you go to a park, depending on what you're wanting to gain that day, depending on what you are motivated by that day. In fact, as we move through these, each one of these and chat about these and describe them, I would encourage you to think about, have I ever been an explorer when I was visiting something, or have I ever been a facilitator? And as I've read the book and learn more about this, I've realized I've been actually probably multiple identities of these in different occasions, depending on what we hope to achieve that day. So just keep that in mind. These are not fixed. If you were one time a facilitator when you went to the zoo with your family, that doesn't mean you're a facilitator for life. You can have a different, you can be categorized in a different group at another time. And just understanding more about these is going to help us as employees, or if we're working at a park, if we're putting on a program, it's going to help us better meet the needs of the folks that we'll chat about. Okay, so what did they find about what is the explorer type? The explorer type are folks that are people that are, they're really motivated by their interests, by their curiosity. They are, if there's a path, let's say in a museum or a nature center, they might not follow that exact path. They might just go from one cool, exciting thing to the next and just follow their own level of interest and curiosity. They're going to wait for something that is going to attract them. When I was reading in the book, a lot of times these types may show up to a science museum, and the folks working the science museum might think everyone is coming today because we've been advertising this awesome expo we're doing. But the explorer type, they probably had no idea about it. They're just there because they want to be there that day. They are most likely to attend some different lectures and programs and things like that, especially if it's going to pique their interest. And so that kind of is a little bit of the description. And then I also want to talk about putting it into practice. So how can you think about these types, but also apply it, in our own programs and parks and spaces. And so, for example, explorer types, they're going to be the most likely to read our labels and our brochures and our guides. Because again, often they don't show up with a plan. They're going to go by the seat of their pants. And so if there's a brochure or a guide or something, that's going to help them figure out, okay, where's my curiosity going to go today? They might be a little afraid of committing to a program that's too long, and maybe they're afraid they're going to miss out on something else. So they're going to shy away from longer programs. If there's a gift shop in a nature center or a museum, and this doesn't apply to everyone, but this is kind of some interesting stuff, they're going to look for things that are tied specifically to what they're interested in. So, and they like really impromptu programs and spontaneous programs as well. So if there's just like a naturalist talk happening on a trail, and an explorer type is around it, they might be the type that will show up for that. And a lot of times they're going to be roaming our trails and spaces, even if we're not doing programs. A lot of times the folks, walking their dogs and things like that, just wanting to get out there and explore, that's a lot of times this type. Before I move on to the next, I can't see anybody, but just reflect or think, or you can put your thumb up on your Zoom. Have you ever been an explorer anywhere? I know I have. Okay. All right, the next type is, we have a chat, just a minute. All the time, Stephanie says. Yep, me too, Stephanie, all the time. Driven by my curiosity and like, oh, there's something shiny, I got to go to that one. So that's how I do it a lot as well. Facilitators, this type, they are not motivated by their own needs. And this is really interesting and really important. They're motivated by others' needs. They're there to make sure that someone else has a really great experience that day. Now, more often than not, and you might be thinking it, often this is a parent, this is a mom or a dad, or even a grandparent, right? It's not always parents. In this category, you can also have, let's say, I've been a facilitator before, I have family in town, and I know I don't want them in my house, and I want to go out and do something and provide a fun experience for them, so that I would have still been a facilitator in that role as well, even if I didn't have a child, right? And so the main thing to remember is they're not motivated by their own interests, by their own curiosity. They're trying to facilitate a great experience for someone else or another group of people. I also think about teachers on field trips, right? Facilitators, right there. They're really focused on making sure other people are learning. The most important thing for facilitators is, where's the facilities? Where are the restrooms? Is there food and water? Is there a gift shop? Things like that. They want to know, and they really like to see a schedule of programs, or like, is there programs happening today? maps, all those things, because they got a big mental load, right? It's not just about them and what they want to do. They're juggling all the other things of how they're going to make sure that their kiddos or their students or their family or whoever they're facilitating is having an excellent time. So they have to really wrap their brain around the ins and outs of your facility, of your park or your program or your expo or whatever it may be. So putting this one into practice, or how to meet the needs of facilitators, you want to occupy and stimulate and engage children. They get really excited. Of course, this is like more parent or grandparent facilitators. Demonstrations for students or kids is really, really exciting for them, because again, they want to make sure that their kid is having the best time, right? That's their primary motivation. Thinking about even exhibit design, say we're talking about a nature center, they want to have really accessible signage. They want to make sure that the exhibits and the signs and the designs and all those things are accessible for everyone, so they don't have to, they're going to be probably interpreting for their kids anyways. I know when I've been to zoos or science museums before, and my little one, if obviously he can't read, and so I'm reading some signs and I'm explaining and trying to teach him as well. So that's something to consider. And facilitators really enjoy getting to know, like if we have naturalists in our park or if we have staff at our expos, just that one-on-one talking to them and that knowledgeable and friendly staff relating to them is really helpful to facilitators. Whereas maybe explorers, for example, maybe they want to talk to naturalists and our staff, and maybe they don't. They're off doing their own thing. So it's just thinking about the differences right there. Experience seekers. So this one was a little confusing at first because it seems kind of really similar to explorers. But here's the difference. Explorers are really motivated by learning, by their curiosity. Experience seekers, they just want to have a cool experience. They want to see the neatest thing. Often they have a limited time. They just want to have like that. I've heard it's called like they're in it for the gram. They're in it for that. And I think, Jane, I was thinking about that when you were talking about adventures, because not only are they out thrill seeking, but then they're going to share it. They're going to say, look how cool this is. I'm going kayaking. That's why I put this funny photo of myself trying to take a selfie hiking and my sister being silly about it. Because at this time I was hiking in Colorado and I was definitely an experience seeker. I was climbing a mountain, like I was excited. And of course I'm posting a selfie on Instagram about it, because why not? And so that's really that experience seeker. They're not necessarily interested in the bigger picture, right? If you have a naturalist program and you start talking about the history of the park and something really specific and exciting, I think I would be really excited about that. They might not be as excited about it because they just want to know what can we do that's fun? How can we recreate outside in a fun way? A lot of times they're first-time visitors. They want to check something off a list. In the book, he refers to it as they really want the Disney experience. They want to make an amazing memory. So they want to make sure, like if there's a gift shop or there's food, everything just goes really well and they leave feeling like they had just the best day ever. Put into practice, this is really interesting, but I've seen this more often, considering and thinking about photo opportunities for them. At first it seems silly, but if you put up like selfie stations or things like that, or just think about the views that you might have in your space and making sure they're accessible, that's really helpful for them. They're always going to be, it's an experience seeker when they might say to you, what's your must see feature? I have to see it. What is it? If you're creating something like a guide to the best of type of thing, that's really helpful for this type of visitor. And then a lot of times, just engaging with staff or with visitors or with our participants or whatever setting this may take place, and just to learn more about what brings them here that day, to understand maybe what category they could be in. So for this one, you could say, how long were you planning on spending with us today? Let me help you point out, let me show you the things you want to see before you leave. So that's something that we can put into practice. The fourth one, professionals and hobbyists. Now, I hope you're all still thinking and reflecting on your own times that you've visited parks and trails and zoos and museums, and I wonder if you've each been one of these so far. This one, I really wonder if we've all been, for sure. This one is a kind of an interesting one. It's a little niche, it's a little unique, but they are motivated by specific knowledge-related goals. It's more than explorers, it's more niche than that. Oftentimes these are going to be your retired biologists or your retired professors or your geologists who are here specifically to see a site. And a lot of times they're going to they're going to want to interact with the staff. They're going to want to pick your brain. They're not really going to do tour guide stuff, because I don't need to sound patronizing, and I'm a professional hobbyist visitor in a lot of places, but they feel like, you know what, I know a lot of this already. I kind of want more of the behind the scenes feel, because like this is my realm anyways. An example of this is I had a position of the education curator at a zoo in Western Nebraska, and I took that a few years ago. Now, I've always loved going to the zoo all my life, and I've always gone to see the animals and learn more because I'm a nature nerd, right? But after I took that job, I started going to zoos, and I was there for the tigers and I was there for the elephants. But I would also track down staff and say, this is the coolest design. How did you guys come up with this exhibit design? Or I would be thinking about the signage and how they did it and how that helped me learn more. So I was thinking not just as like my exciting experience seeker hat, I was also thinking of that professional hobbyist, because that was the world I'm in. And so that's how I was motivated also by that kind of thing as well. How do we put that into practice, or how do we meet the needs of professionals and hobbyists? They might only come to programs that are really, going to peak to their unique interest. Think about Audubon chapters or birding clubs or things like that. Those specific interests that we can reach out to. Specializing programs, astronomy, birding, fungi, hiking groups, or historic hobbyists. I think we have a lot of professional and hobbyist type visitors at our historical parks, certainly. And then a lot of times, working directly with hobby organizations and even building those partnerships. When I was an outdoor education specialist at SRAM, for example, there was a decoy carving club, a duck decoy carving club. And they would come out and they would use our facilities. And we started working with them, and it was just really exciting. We had this really cool partnership. And then we were planning before COVID to put on really cool workshops for other people. And just, there's really a lot of opportunity here with these types of visitors, because they're passionate for sure. I cannot see any of you, but just to humor me, please raise your hand if you've ever been a professional and hobbyist at a park or a museum or anything like that. Thank you, Jane. Okay, very good. Awesome. And then the last group that they found during this research are the rechargers. And that is, they're really motivated by just what that museum or what nature means to them. It provides them solace. It's almost, originally he had this group is called spiritual, but then when when the research went more national and then global, he kind of reframed it to call it less spiritual and just recharging. They're restoring themselves by being there. A lot of times, this is my favorite quote to describe rechargers. What they're seeking is not on the map. So it's not a feature, it's not a program, it's just being there, and being in that space, is important to them. They see the site or the facility or the museum as a refuge from their normal life. It's a confirmation from their beliefs. Often they like to recharge alone. They're not going to want to go to a crowded program. They're probably going to want to be out in the trails or near the lake just on their own, right? And then how do you put this into practice? They're unlikely to attend programs. This is really interesting. Seems like a really easy thing to do, but something you might not have thought about. Double the spaces to sit. So even in museums, just putting a bench in front of, like, near a neat exhibit or something like that. People just want to sit and reflect and recharge, and or along the trails, or along, like maybe near bird feeders or things like that in our spaces, just putting more benches, more places to sit for our rechargers. They're least likely to attend lectures and programs, and they're least likely to visit gift shops as well. So has anyone ever been a recharger? For sure I have. Certainly. In fact, I feel like I could be this most often. I don't know, it's tough. I feel like I've been each one for sure. Maybe it just depends on, when you wake up that morning, what's motivating you. And that's the point of this research, is to kind of understand that these are not fixed identities, but they can change, and understanding them more. We might not be experts. I know I'm certainly not an expert in this behavioral science world. It's just fascinating to me. But just knowing that there's research out there to understand, that's really exciting. Okay, we have a chat, just a minute. Combination with the same trip, absolutely, Erin. I was just telling Jane before this, maybe I'm a bad facilitator because I have a 4-year-old son, but I will tell you this: when we go to a zoo or a science museum, I want him to have the best day ever. Hello, that's part of my job. But I will tell my husband, please watch him for 5 minutes. I need to read this. This is so cool. I need to learn. I'm also motivated by my own interests as well, and learning for myself. So I have been both an explorer and a facilitator at the same time. It might be a little hard to be a recharger and a facilitator at the same time, I'm not gonna lie. But who knows, that would be a fun challenge. So applying what we've learned, I'm gonna put out some polls, and I don't want it to be a quiz, I just want it to be more of a reflection. But I want to see, it's gonna be a quote, a made up quote from a visitor. And I wanna see what you guys think of what type of visitor they might be. So here is the first one. I've never been here and I have about an hour. What is the must-see place at your park? What's your best guess as to what type of visitor this might be? And I'll just do it for about 30, 40 seconds. Okay, about half of you voted.
Looks like they've been paying attention to what you're saying, Amber.
Yeah, they are. Yeah. All right. So most of you said experience seeker. Now, I will say this is a tough one. Explorer and experience seeker are really similar. Again, often you can probably be both. But yeah, experience seeker. The one that points out to me is just what's that must-see place. They're not necessarily saying, tell me more about your park. I want to understand about the ecosystem. They just want to see like the cool feature, right? Okay, so let me launch the next one. So here's the next one. I'm really curious about the wildlife found here and wanting to learn more. Are there any naturalist programs happening today? What type of visitor might this be? What's your best guess? This is a little tough one too. This could certainly be a professional hobbyist. Absolutely. This is probably an explorer because they didn't really have a plan. It sounds like they didn't like research it or anything. And it sounds like they don't have like the most specific interest. They're just kind of a little bit general, but they're going to follow their curiosity. What's going on today? So very good. How about this one? I'm a retired biologist and I used to work in this area. What kind of land management practices are you doing to promote biodiversity in your park? I laugh at this one because I've heard these questions before, and imagine like someone asking this to, someone working at a front desk or something. They might not know some of these things, but they're really excited. This visitor is really excited about these types of things. And you guys are getting it. Absolutely. Professional hobbyists, right? That's definitely a professional hobbyist. I love visiting the park in the winter. It feels like we have the whole place to ourselves. What kind of visitor type might this be? Yeah, you guys are quick with that one. Rechargers for sure. Remember, what they're seeking is not on the map. That's a really cool quote that I think about a lot for them. And the last one. Can you let me know where your facilities are and where your program schedule is for the weekend? My kids are so excited about the bird walk. This one's probably pretty obvious as well. Very good. Okay, you guys all get A's. That wasn't really a quiz. I just wanted to make sure we were understanding, but you all did really well, so very good. Okay, so why is understanding this useful? We talked about this a little bit. We just need to remember that people arrive to our places, our facilities, our programs, whatever it may be, with a certain expectation, right? And if we have a better idea of what their expectations are, and often those expectations are motivated by what's motivating them that day, by some of these things we talked about. If we have a better idea of what those expectations are, that's going to help us better not just meet those expectations, but hopefully exceed those expectations. And because we want to make sure that they have an amazing experience, that they're coming back, that they're knowing that Nebraska Game Parks is an agency that's here to promote outdoor recreation and our outdoor resources and all those things. So this is really helpful to us, just to get to know our visitors and our constituents more, to better meet their needs. And then the last nerdy thing that I'll share, because this is super cool, it's actually how these motivational factors actually affect your retaining of your learning or your memory of these experiences. And so the last little quip I'll share is, in part of his research, Dr. Falk compared the long-term learning of, for example, facilitators and explorers. They have fairly different motivations, right? They're not that easy to conflate. So he did a pre-test, a post-test, and then a 2-year delayed post-test with these survey participants on their understanding of biology before they went to the California Science Center, right after they left, and then 2 years later. Both the facilitators and explorers had a similar, a pre-test score, so that makes sense. And even they had a similar post-test score. Even if I was, a mom facilitator that day, I probably learned just as much as my little kiddo did at, trying to make sure to facilitate he was learning, right? But what's really cool is 2 years later, the explorers, and remember, explorers, they're motivated by their own curiosity, their own learning. They had, on average, a 6.2 on that delayed post-test, where the facilitators averaged only a 5. And that's because literally what motivated them that day impacted what they remembered, what that experiences was, and what they learned. So as a science educator, I think that part is fascinating. That might not be as applicable to everyone here, but I think that's really interesting on how our motivations really influence our experience. So the last thing for everyone today is I just want to ask you, and again, we have like 15-ish minutes or 10 minutes. Feel free to unmute and share, or feel free to add in the chat if you like, but I want to know, how have your ideas about understanding our visitors, have they changed today? And then how might you use some of these things that we learned today? If you feel like sharing, go for it. Or at least reflect on your own. And then the last part is, I just wanted to share that there are those resources. If you're super nerdy about this subject, we have those books, are really cool. There's also that segmentation research survey that Jane talked about, and I will certainly send out those links after this, and along with the recording of this program as well.
And I think one of the things I wanted to pass along to everybody is, think about if you're having an event, if you work at a park area, if you have webinars or seminars or things that you do, think about these types of things and the questions you can ask to assess your audiences and find out what types of learners they are, to tailor what you're doing to their learning style a little bit better. We do that in marketing, trying to tailor our message to what those audiences are. So I think Amber's given us some cool cues here that will tell us more about really how to make a lasting impact on some of our audiences.
Yeah, simply as what brings you here today, and just that engagement can go a long way for you to be understanding some of this. So are there any last questions for Jane or I?
Aaron's noting the thing about taking different types of visitors into account, because you're going to have probably a mixed group of people.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Very good. Thank you, Erin, for that. Anything else? Okay. Well, thank you all again so much for attending. And Jane, thanks for doing this with me. That was very fun. And I learned a lot as well. And I will see you all at the next Lunch and Learn series. Have a fantastic day.
Sounds good. Thank you, Amber.
Bye.